The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, a reading by Samirananda for his grandparents, J. and H.K. Kempama, a recording for Vox Olympia. Contents. Chapter 1. Ganapati the Scribe. 2. Devarata. 3. Bhishma's Vow. 4. Amba and Bhishma. 5. Devayani and Kacha. 6. The marriage of Devayani. 7. Yayati. 8. Vidura. 9. Kunti Devi. 10. Death of Pandu. 11. Bhima. 12. Karna. 13. Drona. 14. The Wax Palace. 15. The escape of the Pandavas. 16. The slaying of Bakasura. 17. Draupadi Swayamvaram. 18. Indraprastha. 19. The Saranga birds. 20. Jarasandha. 21. The slaying of Jarasandha. 22. The first honor. 23. Shakuni comes in. 24. The invitation. 25. The wager. 26. Draupadi's grief. 27. Dhritarashtra's anxiety. 28. Krishna's vow. 29. Pashupata. 30. Affliction is nothing new. 31. Agastya. 32. Rishyasringa. 33. Fruitless penance. 34. Yavakrida's end. 35. Mere learning is not enough. 36. Ashtavakra. 37. Bhima and Hanuman. 38. I am no crane. 39. The wicked are never satisfied. 40. Duryodhana disgraced. 41. Shri Krishna's hunger. 42. The enchanted pool. 43. Domestic service. 44. Virtue vindicated. 45. Matsya defended. 46. Prince Uttara. 47. Promise fulfilled. 48. Virata's delusion. 49. Taking counsel. 50. Arjuna's charioteer. 51. Shalya against his nephews. 52. Vritra. 53. Nahusha. 54. Sanjaya's mission. 55. Not a needle point of territory. 56. Krishna's mission. 57. Attachment and duty. 58. The Pandava generalismo. 59. Balarama. 60. Rukmini. 61. Non-cooperation. 62. Krishna teaches. 63. Yudhishthira seeks benediction. 64. The first day's battle. 65. The second day. 66. The third day's battle. 67. The fourth day. 68. The fifth day. 69. The sixth day. 70. The seventh day. 71. The eighth day. 72. The ninth day. 73. The passing of Bhishma. 74. Karna and the Grandsire. 75. Drona in command. 76. To seize Yudhishthira alive. 77. The 12th day. 78. Brave Bhagadatta. 79. Abhimanyu. 80. Death of Abhimanyu. 81. A father's grief. 82. The Sindhu king. 83. Borrowed armor. 84. Yudhishthira's misgivings. 85. Yudhishthira's fond hope. 86. Karna and Bhima. 87. Pledge respected. 88. Somadatta's end. 89. Jayadratha slain. 90. Drona passes away. 91. The death of Karna. 92. Duryodhana. 93. The Pandavas reproached. 94. Ashwatthama. 95. Avenged. 96. Who can give solace? 97. Yudhishthira's anguish. 98. Yudhishthira comforted. 99. Envy. 100. Utanga. 101. A pound of flour. 102. Yudhishthira rules. 103. Dhritarashtra. 104. The passing away of the three. 105. Krishna passes away. 106. Yudhishthira's final trial. End of contents. The Mahabharata, retold by C Rajagopalachari, a recording for Vox Olympia. The Mahabharata, a translation by C Rajagopalachari, the author's preface. It is not an exaggeration to say that the persons and incidents portrayed in the great literature of a people influence national character, and no less potently than the actual heroes and events enshrined in its history. It may be claimed that the former play an even more important part in the formation of ideals which give to character its impulsive growth. In the moving history of our land, from time immemorial, great minds have been formed and nourished and touched to the heroic deeds by the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. In most Indian homes, children formerly learnt these immortal stories as they learnt their mother tongue at their mother's knee. And the sweetness and sorrows of Sita and Draupadi, the heroic fortitude of Rama and Arjuna, and the loving fidelity of Lakshmana and Hanuman became the stuff of the young philosophy of life. The growing complexity of life has changed the simple pattern of early home life. Still, there are few in our land who do not know the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Though the stories come to them so embroidered with garish fancies of the Kalakshepam, that is the devotional meeting where an expert scholar and a singer tells a story to his audience, and the cinema, as to retain but little of the dignity and approach to the truth of Vyasa and Valmiki. Vyasa's Mahabharata is one of our noblest heritages, and it is my cherished belief that to hear it faithfully told is to love it and come under its elevating influence. It strengthens the soul and drives home as nothing else does the vanity of ambition and the evil and the futility of anger and hatred. The realities of life are idealized by genius and give the form that makes drama, poetry, and great prose. Since literature is closely related to life, so long as the human family is divided into nations, literature cannot escape the effects of such a division. But the highest literature transcends regionalism, and through it, when we are properly attuned, we realize the essential oneness of the human family. The Mahabharata is of this class. It belongs to the world and not only to India. To the people of India, indeed, this epic has been an unfailing and perennial source of spiritual strength. Learned at the mother's knee with reverence and love, it has inspired great men to heroic deeds as well as enabled the humble to face their trials with fortitude and faith. The Mahabharata was composed many thousands of years ago, but generations of gifted reciters have added to Vyasa's original a great mass of material. All the floating literature that was thought to be worth preserving, historical, geographical, legendary, political, theological, and philosophical of nearly 30 centuries found a place in it. In those days, when there were no printing, interpolation in a region-recognized classic seemed to correspond to inclusion in the National Library. In those days, when there was no printing, interpolation in a recognized classic seemed to correspond to inclusion in the National Library. Divested of these accretions, the Mahabharata is a noble poem possessing in a supreme degree the characteristics of a true epic, great and fateful movement, heroic characters, and stately diction. The characters in the epic move with the vitality of real life. It is difficult to find anywhere such vivid portraiture on so ample a canvas. Bhishma, the perfect knight, the venerable Drona, the vain but chivalrous Karna, Duryodhana, whose perverse pride is redeemed by great courage in adversity, the high-souled Pandavas with godlike strength as well as power of suffering, Draupadi, most unfortunate of queens, Kunti, the worthy mother of heroes, Gandhari, the devoted wife and the sad mother of the wicked sons of Dhritarashtra. These are some of the immortal figures on that crowded but never confused canvas. Then there is the great Krishna himself, most energetic of men, whose divinity scintillates through a cloud of very human characteristics. His high purposefulness pervades the whole epic. One can read even a translation and feel the overwhelming power of the incomparable vastness and sublimity of the poem. The Mahabharata discloses a rich civilization and a highly evolved society, which though of an older world, strangely resembles the India of our own time, with the same values and ideals. India was divided into a number of independent kingdoms. Occasionally, one king more distinguished or ambitious than the rest would assume the title of the emperor, securing the acquiescence of other royalties, and signalized it by a great sacrificial feast. The assumption of imperial title conferred no overlordship. The emperor was only the first among his peers. The art of war was highly developed, and military prowess and skill were held in high esteem. We read in the Mahabharata of standardized phalanxes and of various tactical movements. There was an accepted code of honorable warfare, deviation from which met with reproof among Kshatriyas. The advent of the Kali Yuga is marked by many breaches of these conventions in the Kurukshetra battle, on account of the bitterness of conflict, frustrations, and bereavements. Some of the most impressive passages in the epic center around these breaches of dharma. The population lived in cities and villages The cities were headquarters of kings and their household and staff. There were beautiful palaces and gardens, and the lives led were cultured and luxurious. There was trade in the cities, but the mass of the people were agriculturalists. Besides this urban and rural life, there was a very highly cultured life in the seclusion of forest recesses centered around the ascetic teachers. These ashramas kept alive the bright fires of learning and spiritual thought. Young men of noble birth eagerly sought education at these ashramas. World-weary aged went there for peace. These centers of culture were cherished by rulers of the land, and not the proudest of them would dare to treat the members of the hermitages otherwise than with respect and consideration. Women were highly honored and entered largely in the lives of their husbands and sons. The caste system prevailed, but intercaste marriages were not unknown. Some of the greatest warriors in the Mahabharata were Brahmanas. The Mahabharata has molded the character and civilization of one of the most numerous of the world's people. How did it fulfill? How is it still continuing to fulfill this function? By its gospel of Dharma, which, like a golden thread, runs through all the complex movements in the epic. By its lesson that hatred breeds hatred, but covetousness and violence lead inevitably to ruin, that only real conquest is in the battle against one's lower nature. End of author's preface. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, a reading for Vox Olympia. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, Chapter 1, Ganapati the Scribe. Bhagavan Vyasa, the celebrated compiler of the Vedas, was the son of the great sage Parasara. It was he who gave the world the divine epic of the Mahabharata. Having conceived the Mahabharata, he thought of the means of giving the sacred story to the world. He meditated on Brahma, the creator, who manifested himself before him. Vyasa saluted him with bowed head and folded hands and prayed, "Lord, I have conceived an excellent work, but cannot think of one who can take it down to my dictation." Brahma extolled Vyasa and said, "O sage, invoke Ganapati and beg him to bear amanuensis." Having said these words, he disappeared. The sage Vyasa meditated on Ganapati, who appeared before him. Vyasa received him with due respect and sought his aid. "Lord Ganapati, I shall dictate the story of the Mahabharata, and I pray you to be graciously pleased to write it down." Ganapati replied, "Very well, I shall do as you wish, but my pen must not stop while I am writing, so you must dictate without pause or hesitation. I can only write on this condition." Vyasa agreed, guarding himself, however, with a counter stipulation, "Be it so, but you must first grasp the meaning of what I dictate before you write it down." Ganapati smiled and agreed to the condition. Then the sage began to sing the story of the Mahabharata. He would occasionally compose some complex stanzas which would make Ganapati pause a while to get at the meaning, and Vyasa would avail himself of this interval to compose many stanzas in his mind. Thus the Mahabharata came to be written by Ganapati to the dictation of Vyasa. It was before the days of printing, when the memory of the learned was the sole repository of books. Vyasa first taught the great epic to his son, the sage Shuka. Later, he expounded it to many other disciples. Were it not so, the book might have been lost to future generations. Tradition has it that Narada told the story of Mahabharata to the Devas, while Sukha taught it to the Gandharvas, the Rakshasas, and the Yakshas. It is well known that the virtuous and the learned Vaishampayana, one of the chief disciples of Vyasa, revealed the epic for the benefit of humanity. Janamajaya, the son of the great king Parikshit, conducted a great sacrifice, in the course of which Vaishampayana narrated the story at the request of the former. Afterwards, this story, as told by Vaishampayana, was recited by Sutta in the forest of Naimisha to an assembly of sages under the lead of Rishi Shaunaka. Sutta addressed the assembly. I had the good fortune to hear the story of Mahabharata composed by Vyasa to teach humanity dharma and the other ends of life. I should like to narrate it to you. At these words, the ascetics eagerly gathered around him. Sutta continued, I heard the main story of the Mahabharata and the episodic tales contained therein, told by Vaishampayana at the sacrifice conducted by King Janamajaya. Afterwards, I made an extensive pilgrimage to various sacred places and also visited the battlefield where the great battle described in the epic was fought. I have now come here to meet you all. He then proceeded to tell the whole story of the Mahabharata in the grand assembly. After the death of the great king Shantanu, Chitrangada became the king of Hastinapur, and he was succeeded by Vichitravirya. The latter had two sons, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. The elder of the two, being born blind, Pandu, the younger brother, ascended the throne. In the course of his reign, Pandu committed a certain offense and had to resort to the forest with his two wives, where he spent many years in penance. During their stay in the forest, the two wives of Pandu, Kunti and Madri, gave birth to 5 sons who became well known while they were still living in the forest. The sages brought up the 5 Pandavas during their early years. When Yudhishthira, the eldest, attained the age of 16, the rishis led them all back to Hastinapur and entrusted them to the old grandsire Bhishma. In a short time, the Pandavas gained mastery over the Vedas and the Vedanta as well as over various arts, especially pertaining to the Kshatriyas. The Kauravas, the sons of blind Dhritarashtra, became jealous of the Pandavas and tried to injure them in various ways. Finally, Bhishma, the head of the family, intervened to bring about mutual understanding and peace between them. Accordingly, the Pandavas and the Kauravas began to rule separately from their respective capitals, Indraprastha and Hastinapura. Sometime later, there was a game of dice between the Kauravas and the Pandavas according to the then prevailing Kshatriya code of honor. Shakuni, who played on the behalf of the Kauravas, defeated Yudhishthira. As a result, the Pandavas had to be in exile for a period of 13 years. They left the kingdom and went to the forest with their devoted wife, Draupadi. According to the conditions of the game, the Pandavas spent 12 years in the forest and the 13th year incognito. When they returned and demanded of Duryodhana their paternal heritage, the latter, who had in the meanwhile usurped their kingdom, refused to return it. War followed as a consequence. The Pandavas defeated Duryodhana and regained their patrimony. The Pandavas ruled the kingdom for 36 years. This is the substance of the story of the Mahabharata. In this ancient and wonderful epic of our land, there are many illustrative tales and sublime teachings besides the narratives of the fortunes of the Pandavas. The Mahabharata is in fact a veritable ocean containing countless pearls and gems. It is with the Ramayana a living fountain of ethics and culture of our motherland. End of Chapter 1, the Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari. Chapter 2, Devrata. You must certainly become my wife, whoever you may be. Thus said the great king Shantanu to the goddess Ganga, who stood before him in human form, intoxicating his senses with her superhuman loveliness. The king earnestly offered for her love, his kingdom, his wealth, his all, his very life. Ganga replied, O king, I shall become your wife, but on certain conditions that neither you nor anyone else should ever ask me who I am or whence I come. You must also not stand in the way of whatever I do, good or bad, nor must you ever be wroth with me on any account whatsoever. You must not say anything displeasing to me. If you act otherwise, I shall leave you then and there. Do you agree? The infatuated king vowed his assent, and she became his wife and lived with him. The heart of the king was captivated by her modesty and grace and the steady love she bore him. King Shantanu and Ganga lived a life of perfect happiness, oblivious of the passage of time. She gave birth to many children. Each newborn babe she took to the Ganges and cast it into the river. and then returned to the king with a smiling face. Shantanu was filled with horror and anguish at such a fiendish conduct, but suffered it all in silence, mindful of the promise he had made. Often he wondered who she was, wherefrom she had come, and why she acted like a murderous witch. Still, bound by his word and his all-mastering love for her, he uttered no word of blame or remonstrance. Thus she killed 7 children. When the 8th child was born, she was about to throw it into the Ganges. Shantanu could not bear it any longer. He cried, "Stop! Stop! Why are you bent on this horrid and unnatural murder of your own innocent babes?" With this outburst the king restrained her. "O great king," she replied, "you have forgotten your promise, for your heart is set on your child and you do not need me any more. I go. I shall not kill this child, but listen to my story before you judge me. I, who am constrained to play this hateful role by the curse of Vasishtha, am the goddess Ganga, adored of gods and men. Vasishtha cursed the 8 Vasus to be born in the world of men, and moved by their supplication, said I was to be their mother. I bore them to you, and well is it for you that it was so. For you will go to higher regions for this service you have done to the 8 Vasus. I shall bring up this last child of yours for some time, and then return it to you as my gift." After saying these words, the goddess disappeared with the child. It was this child who later became famous as Bhishma. This was how the Vasus came to incur the Vasishtha's curse. They went for a holiday with their wives to a mountain tract where stood the hermitage of Vasishtha. One of them saw Vasishtha's cow Nandini grazing there. Its divinely beautiful form attracted him, and he pointed it out to the ladies. They were all loud in praise of the graceful animal, and one of them requested her husband to secure it for her. He replied, "What need have we? This cow belongs to sage Vasishtha, who is the master of the whole place. Man will certainly become immortal by drinking its milk, but this is no gain to us. We're already immortal. Is it worth our while to incur Vasishtha's wrath merely to satisfy a whim?" But she was not thus to be put off. "I have a dear companion in the mortal world. It is for her sake that I make this request. Before Vasishtha returns, we shall have escaped with the cow. You must certainly do this for my sake, for it is my dearest wish." Finally, her husband yielded, and all the Vasus joined together and took the cow and its calf away with them. When the Vasishtha returned to his ashrama, he missed the cow and the calf because they were indispensable for his daily rituals. Very soon, he came to know by his yogic insight all that had taken place. Anger seized him, and he uttered a curse against the Vasus. The sage, whose sole wealth was his austerity, willed that they should be born into the world of men. When the Vasus came to know of the curse, repentant too late, they threw themselves on the sage's mercy and implored forgiveness. Vasishtha said, "The curse must needs take its course. Prabhasa, the Vasu who seized the cow, will live long in the world in all the glory, but the others will be freed from the curse as soon as born. My words cannot prove ineffective, but I shall soften the curse to this extent. Afterwards, Vasishtha set his mind again on his austerities, and the effect of which had been slightly impaired by his anger. Sages who perform austerities acquire the power to curse, but every exercise of this power reduces their store of merit. The Vasus felt relieved and approached goddess Ganga and begged of her, "We pray you to become a mother. For our sake we beseech you to descend to earth and marry a worthy man. Throw us into the water as soon as we are born and liberate us from the curse." The goddess granted their prayer and came to earth and became the wife of Shantanu. When the goddess Ganga left Shantanu and disappeared with the 8th child, the king gave up all sensual pleasures and ruled the kingdom in a spirit of asceticism. One day he was wandering along the banks of the Ganges when he saw a boy endowed with the beauty and form of Devendra, the king of the gods. The child was amusing himself by casting a dam of arrows across the Ganges in flood, playing with the mighty river as a child with an indulgent mother. To the king, who stood transfixed with amazement at the sight, the goddess Ganga revealed herself and presented the child as his own son. She said, "O king, this is that 8th child I bore you. I have brought him up till now. His name is Devarata. He has mastered the art of arms and equals Parashurama in prowess. He has learnt the Vedas and the Vedanta from Vasishtha and is well versed in the arts and sciences known to Shukra. Take back with you this child who is a great archer and hero as well as master in statecraft." Then she blessed the boy and handed him to his father, the king, and disappeared. End of chapter 2. The Mahabharata translated by C Rajagopalachari. Chapter 3. The Mahabharata translated by C Rajagopalachari. Chapter 3. Bhishma's Vow. With joy the king received to his heart and his kingdom the resplendent and youthful prince Devarata and crowned him as the Yuvaraja, the heir apparent. 4 years went by. One day, as the king was wandering on the banks of the Yamuna, the air was suddenly filled with a fragrance so divinely sweet that the king sought for its cause, and he traced it to a maiden so lovely that she seemed a goddess. A sage had conferred on her a boon that a divine perfume should emanate from her, and this was now pervading the whole forest. From the moment the goddess Ganga left him, the king had kept his senses under control. But the sight of this divinely beautiful maiden burst the bonds of restraint and filled him with an overmastering desire. He asked her to be his wife. The maiden said, "I am a fisherwoman, the daughter of the chief of the fishermen. May it please you to ask him and get his consent." Her voice was sweet as her form. Her father was an astute man. He said, "O king, there is no doubt that this maiden, like every other, has to be married to someone, and you are indeed worthy of her. Still, you have to make me a promise before you can have her." Shantanu replied, "If it is just a promise, I shall make it." The chief of the fisher folk said, "The child born of this maiden should be the king after you." Though almost mad with passion, the king could not make this promise, as it meant setting aside the godlike Devarata, the son of Ganga, who was entitled to the crown. It was a price that could not be thought of without shame. He therefore returned to his capital Hastinapur, sick with baffled desire. He did not reveal the matter to anyone and languished in silence. One day Devarata asked his father, "My father, you have all that your heart could wish. Why then are you so unhappy? How is it that you're like the one pining away with a secret sorrow?" The king replied, "Dear son, what you say is true. I am indeed tortured with mental pain and anxiety. You are my only son, and you are always preoccupied with military ambitions. Life in the world is uncertain and wars are incessant. If anything untoward befalls you, our family will become extinct. Of course, you are equal to 100 sons. Still, those who are well read in the scriptures say that in this transitory world, having but one son is the same as having no son at all. It is not proper that the perpetuation of our family should depend on a single life, and above all things, I desire the perpetuation of our family. This is the cause of my anguish." The father prevaricated, being ashamed to reveal the whole story to his son. The wise Devarata realized that there must be a secret cause for the mental condition of his father, and questioning the king's charioteer, came to know of his meeting with the fisher maiden on the banks of the Yamuna. He went to the chief of the fishermen and besought his daughter's hand on his father's behalf. The fisherman was respectful but firm. "My daughter is indeed fit to be the king's spouse. Then, should not her son become king? But you have been crowned as heir apparent, and will naturally succeed your father. It is this that stands in the way." Devarata replied, "I give you my word that the son born of this maiden shall be king, and I renounce in his favor my right as heir apparent." And he took a vow to that effect. The chief of the fishermen said, "O best of the Bharata race, you have done what no one else born of royal blood you have done till now. You are indeed a hero. You can yourself conduct my daughter to the king, your father. Still, hear with patience these words of mine which I say as the father of the girl. I have no doubt you will keep your word, but how can I hope that children born of you will renounce their birthright? Your sons will naturally be mighty heroes like you, and will be hard to resist if they seek to seize the kingdom by force. This is the doubt that torments me." When he heard this naughty question posed by the girl's father, Devarata, who was bent on fulfilling the king's desire, made his supreme renunciation. He vowed with upraised arm to the father of the maiden, "I shall never marry, and I dedicate myself to a life of unbroken chastity." And as he uttered these words of renunciation, the gods showered flowers on his head, and cries of "Bhishma! Bhishma!" resounded in the air. Bhishma means one who undertakes a terrible vow and fulfills it. That name became the celebrated epithet of Devarata from that time. Then the son of Ganga led the maiden Satyavati to his father. 2 sons were born of Satyavati to Shantanu, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya, who ascended the throne one after the other. Vichitravirya had 2 sons, Dhritarashtra and Pandu, born respectively of his 2 queens, Ambika and Ambalika. The sons of Dhritarashtra, 100 in number, were known as the Kauravas. Pandu had 5 sons who became famous as the Pandavas. Bhishma lived long, honored by all as the grandsire until the end of the famous battle of Kurukshetra. End of chapter 3. The Mahabharata by C Rajagopalachari. Chapter 4. Mahabharata. Amba and Bhishma. Chitrangada, the son of Satyavati, was killed in battle with a Gandharva. As he died childless, his brother Vichitravirya was the rightful heir and was duly crowned king. And as he was a minor, Bhishma governed the kingdom in his name till he came of age. When Vichitravirya reached adolescence, Bhishma cast about for a bride for him. And as he heard that the daughters of the king of Kashi were to choose their husbands according to the ancient Kshatriya practice, he went there to secure them for his brother. The rulers of Koshala, Vanga, Pundra, Kalinga, and other princes and potentates had also repaired to Kashi for the Swayamvara, attired in their best. The princesses were so far famed for beauty and accomplishment that there was fierce competition to win them. Bhishma was famous among the Kshatriyas as a mighty man-at-arms. At first, everyone thought that the redoubtable hero had come merely to witness the festivities of the Swayamvara. But when they found that he was also a suitor, the young princes felt themselves let down and were full of chagrin. They did not know that he had really come for the sake of his brother Vichitravirya. The princes began to cast affronts at Bhishma. This most excellent and wise descendant of the Bharata race forgets that he is too old, and forgets also his vow of celibacy. What has this old man to do with the Swayamvara? Fie on him! The princesses who were to choose their husbands barely glanced at the old man and looked away. Bhishma's wrath flamed up. He challenged the assembled princes to a trial of their manhood and defeated them all. And taking the 3 princesses in his chariot, he set out for Hastinapur. But before he had gone far, Shalva, the king of Shaubala country was attached to Amba, who intercepted and opposed him. For that princess, Amba had mentally chosen Shalva as her husband. After a bitter fight, Shalva was worsted, and no wonder, as Bhishma was a peerless bowman. But at the request of the princess, Bhishma spared his life. Arriving in Hastinapur with the princesses, Bhishma made preparations for their marriage to Vichitravirya. When all were assembled for the marriage, Amba smiled mockingly at Bhishma, addressed him as follows: O son of Ganga, you are aware of what is enjoined in the scriptures. I have mentally chosen Shalva, the king of Shalvala, as my husband. You brought me here by force. Knowing this, do what you learned in scriptures should do. Bhishma admitted the force of her objection and sent her to Shalva with proper escort. The marriage of Ambika and Ambalika, the two younger sisters, with Vichitravirya was duly solemnized. Amba went rejoicing to Shalva and told him what had happened. I have mentally chosen you as my husband from the very start. Bhishma has sent me to you. Marry me according to the Shastras. Shalva replied, Bhishma defeated me in sight of all and carried you away. I have been disgraced. So I cannot receive you now as my wife. Return to him and do as he commands. With these words, Shalva sent her back to Bhishma. Amba returned to Hastinapur and told Bhishma what had taken place. The grandsire tried to induce Vichitravirya to marry her. But Vichitravirya roundly refused to marry a maiden whose heart had already been given to another. Amba then turned to Bhishma and she sought him to marry her himself, as there was no other recourse. It was impossible for Bhishma to break his vow, sorry as he was for Amba. And after some vain attempts to make Vichitravirya change his mind, he told her that there was no way left to her but to go again to Shalva and to seek to persuade him. This at first she was too proud to do, and for long years she abode in Hastinapura. Finally, in sheer desperation, she went to Shalva and found him adamant in refusal. The lotus-eyed Amba spent 6 bitter years in sorrow and baffled hope, and her heart was seared with suffering, and all the sweetness in her turned to gall and fierce hatred towards Bhishma as the cause of her blighted life. She sought in vain for a champion among the princes to fight and kill Bhishma and thus avenge her wrongs, but even the foremost warriors were afraid of Bhishma and paid no heed to her appeal. At last, she resorted to hard austerities to get the grace of Lord Subramanya. He graciously appeared before her and gave her a garland of ever-fresh lotuses, saying that the wearer of that garland would become the enemy of Bhishma. Amba took the garland and again besought every Kshatriya to accept the garland gift of the six-faced Lord and to champion her cause. But no one had wanted to antagonize Bhishma. Finally, she went to King Drupada, who also refused to grant her prayer. She then hung the garland at Drupada's palace gate and went away to the forest. Some ascetics whom she met there and to whom she told a sorrowful tale advised her to go to Parashurama as a suppliant. She followed their advice. On hearing her sad story, Parashurama was moved with compassion and said, "Dear child, what do you want? I can ask Shalva to marry you if you wish it." Amba said, "No, I do not wish it. I no longer desire marriage or home or happiness. There is now but one thing in life for me, revenge on Bhishma. The only boon I seek is the death of Bhishma." Parashurama, moved as much by her anguish as by her abiding hatred of the Kshatriya race, espoused her cause and fought with Bhishma. It was a long and equal combat between the two greatest men-at-arms of the age. But in the end, Parashurama had to acknowledge defeat. He told Amba, "I have done all that I could and I have failed. Throw yourself on the mercy of Bhishma. That is the only course left to you." Consumed with grief and rage, and kept alive only by the passion for revenge, Amba went to the Himalayas and practiced rigorous austerities to get the grace of Shiva. Now that all human aid had failed her, Shiva appeared before her and granted her a boon that in her next birth she would slay Bhishma. Amba was impatient for that rebirth which would give her heart's desire. She made a pyre and plunged into the fire, pouring out the flame in her heart into that scarcely hotter blaze of the pyre. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Amba was born as the daughter of King Drupada. A few years after her birth, she saw the garland of never-fading flowers that still hung at the palace gate and had remained there untouched by anyone through fear. She put it round her neck. Her father Drupada was in consternation at her temerity, which he feared would draw on his head the wrath of Bhishma. He sent his daughter in exile out of the capital to the forest. She practiced austerities in the forest and in time was transformed into a male and became known as the warrior Shikhandin. With Shikhandin as his charioteer, Arjuna attacked Bhishma on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Bhishma knew that Shikhandin was born as female, and true to his code of chivalry, he would not fight him under any circumstances. So it was that Arjuna could fight screened by Shikhandin and conquer Bhishma, especially because Bhishma knew that his long and weary probation on earth was finished and consented to be vanquished. As the arrows struck Bhishma in his last fight, he singled out those which had pierced him deepest and said, "This is Arjuna's arrows and not Shikhandin's," and so fell this great warrior. End of chapter 4, the Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, Chapter 8, Vidura. The sage Mandavya, who had acquired the strength of mind and knowledge of the scriptures, spent his days in penance and the practice of truth. He lived in a hermitage in the forest on the outskirts of the city. One day, while he was immersed in silent contemplation under the shade of a tree outside his hut of leaves, a band of robbers fled through the woods with officers of the king in hot pursuit. The fugitives entered the ashrama thinking it would be a convenient place to hide themselves in. They placed their booty in a corner and hid themselves. The soldiers of the king came to the ashrama tracking their footsteps. The commander of the soldiers asked Mandavya, who was wrapped in deep meditation, in a tone of peremptory command, "Did you see the robbers pass by? Where did they go? Reply at once, that we may give chase and capture them." The sage, who was absorbed in yoga, remained silent. The commander repeated the question insolently, but the sage did not hear anything. In the meantime, some of the attendants entered the ashram and discovered the stolen goods lying there. They reported this to their commander. All of them went in and found the stolen goods and the robbers who were in hiding. The commander thought, "Now I know the reason why this Brahmana pretended to be a silent sage. He is indeed the chief of these robbers. He's inspired this robbery." Then he ordered his soldiers to guard the place and went to the king and told him that sage Mandavya had been caught with the stolen goods. The king was very angry at the audacity of the chief of robbers who had put on the garb of a Brahmana sage, the better to deceive the world. Without pausing to verify the facts, he ordered the wicked criminal, as he taught him to be impaled. The commander returned to the hermitage, impaled Mandavya on a spear, and handed over the stolen things to the king. The virtuous sage, though impaled on the spear, did not die. Since he was in yoga when he was impaled, he remained alive by the power of yoga. Sages who lived in other parts of the forest came to his hermitage and asked Mandavya how he came to be in that terrible pass. Mandavya replied, "Who shall I blame? The servants of the king who protect the world, servants of the king who protects the world, they've inflicted this punishment." The king was surprised and frightened when he learned that the impaled sage was still alive and that he was surrounded by other sages of the forest. He hastened to the forest with his attendants and at once ordered the sage to be taken down from the spear. Then he prostrated at his feet and prayed humbly to be forgiven for the offense unwittingly committed. Mandavya was not angry with the king. He went straight to Dharma, the divine dispenser of justice, who was seated on his throne, and asked him, "What crime have I committed to deserve this torture?" Lord Dharma, who knew the great power of the sage, replied in all humility, "O sage, you have tortured birds and bees. Are you not aware that all the deeds, good or bad, however small, inevitably produce good or evil?" Mandavya was surprised at this reply of Lord Dharma and asked, "And when did I commit this offense?" Lord Dharma replied, "When you were a child." Mandavya then pronounced a curse on Dharma. "This punishment you've decreed is far in excess of the deserts of a mistake committed by a child in ignorance. Be born, therefore, as a mortal in the world." Lord Dharma, who was thus cursed by sage Mandavya, incarnated as Vidura and was born of the servant maid of Ambalika, the wife of Vichitravirya, as half-brothers to Pandu and Dhritarashtra. The story is intended to show that Vidura was the incarnation of Dharma. The great man of the world regarded Vidura as a Mahatma who was unparalleled in his knowledge of Dharma, Shastras, and statesmanship, and was totally devoid of attachment and anger. Bhishma appointed him while he was still in his teens as the chief counselor of King Dhritarashtra. Vyasa has it that no one in the three worlds could equal Vidura in virtue and knowledge. When Dhritarashtra gave his permission for the game of dice, Vidura fell at his feet and protested solemnly, "O king and lord, I cannot approve of this action. Strife will set in among your sons as a result. Pray, do not allow this." Dhritarashtra also tried in manly ways to dissuade his wicked son. He said to him, "Do not proceed with this game. Vidura does not approve of it. The wise Vidura of lofty intellect was ever intent on our welfare. He says the game is bound to result in fierceness of hate, which will consume us and our kingdom." But Duryodhana did not heed his advice, carried away by his doting fondness for his son. Dhritarashtra surrendered his better judgment and sent to Yudhishthira the fateful invitation to the game. Chapter 9. Kunti Devi. Sura, the grandfather of Sri Krishna, was a worthy scion of the Yadava race. His daughter, Pritha, was noted for her beauty and virtues. Since his cousin Kunti Bhoja was childless, Sura gave his daughter Pritha in adoption to him. From that time she was known by the name of Kunti after her adoptive father. When Kunti was a little girl, the sage Durvasa stayed for some time as a guest in her father's house, and she served the sage for a year with all care and patience and devotion. He was so pleased with her that he gave her a divine mantra. He said, "If you call upon any god, repeating this mantra, he will manifest himself to you and bless you with a child equal to him in glory." He granted her this boon because he foresaw by his yogic power the misfortune that was in store for her future husband. The impatient curiosity of youth made Kunti test then and there the efficacy of the mantra by repeating it and invoking the sun, whom she saw shining in the heavens. At once the sky grew dark with clouds, and under the cover of them the sun god approached the beautiful princess Kunti, and stood gazing at her with ardent, soul-scorching admiration. Kunti, overpowered by the glorious vision of her divine visitor, asked, "O God, who art thou?" The sun replied, "Dear maiden, I am the sun. I have been drawn to you by the spell of the child-giving mantra that you uttered." Kunti was aghast and said, "I am an unwedded girl, dependent on my father. I am not fit for motherhood and do not desire it. I merely wished to test the power of the boon granted by sage Durvasa. Go back and forgive this childish folly of mine." But the sun god could not thus return, because the power of the mantra held him. She, for her part, was mortally afraid of being blamed by the world. The sun god, however, reassured her, "No blame shall attach to you. After bearing my son, you will regain virginity. Kunti conceived by the grace of the sun, the giver of light and life to all the world. Divine births take place immediately without the 9 months' weary course of mortal gestation. She gave birth to Karna, who was born with divine armor and earrings and was bright and beautiful like the sun. In time, he became one of the world's greatest heroes. After the birth of the child, Kunti once again became a virgin as a result of the boon granted by the sun. She wondered what she should do with the child. To hide her fault, she placed the child in a sealed box and set it afloat in a river. A childless charioteer happened to see the floating case and, taking it, was surprised and delighted to see within it a gorgeously beautiful child. He handed it over to his wife, who lavished a mother's love on it. Thus, Karna, the son of the sun god, came to be brought up as a charioteer's child. When the time came for giving Kunti in marriage, Kunti Bhoja invited all the neighboring princes and held a Swayamvara for her to choose her husband. Many eager suitors flocked to the Swayamvara, as the princess was widely famed for her great beauty and virtue. Kunti placed the garland on the neck of King Pandu, the bright representative of the Bharata race, whose personality eclipsed the luster of all the other princes assembled there. The marriage was duly solemnized, and she accompanied her husband to his capital, Hastinapur. On the advice of Bhishma, and in accordance with the prevailing custom, Pandu took a second wife, Madri, the sister of the king of Madra. In the old days, the king took 2 or 3 wives for making sure of progeny and not for mere sensual desire. Chapter 10. Death of Pandu. One day, King Pandu was out hunting. A sage and his wife were also sporting in the forest in the guise of a deer. Pandu shot the male with an arrow in ignorance of the fact that it was a sage in disguise. Stricken to death, the Rishi thus cursed Pandu, "Sinner, you will meet with death the moment you taste the pleasures of the bed." Pandu was heartbroken at this curse and retreated to the forest with his wives after entrusting his kingdom to Bhishma and Vidura, and lived there a life of perfect abstinence. Seeing that Pandu was desirous of offspring, which the Rishi's curse had denied him, Kunti confided to him the story of the mantra she had received from Durvasa. He urged Kunti and Madri to use the mantra, and thus it was said that the 5 Pandavas were born of gods to Kunti and Madri. They were born and brought up in the forest among ascetics. King Pandu lived for many years in the forest with his wives and children. It was springtime, and one day Pandu and Madri forgot their sorrows in the rapture of sympathy with the throbbing life around them, the happy flowers, creepers, birds, and other creatures of the forest. In spite of Madri's earnest and repeated protests, Pandu's resolution broke down under the exhilarating influence of the season, and at once the curse of the sage took effect, and Pandu fell dead. Madri could not contain her sorrow. Since she felt that she was responsible for the death of the king, she burnt herself on the pyre of her husband, entreating Kunti to remain and to be the mother to her doubly orphaned children. The sages of the forest took the bereaved and grief-stricken Kunti and the Pandavas to Hastinapur and entrusted them to Bhishma. The Yudhishthira was but 16 years old at that time. When the sages came to Hastinapur and reported the death of Pandu in the forest, the whole kingdom was plunged in sorrow. Vidura, Bhishma, Vyasa, Dhritarashtra and others performed the funeral rites. All the people in the kingdom lamented at a personal loss. Vyasa said to Satyavati, the grandmother, "The past has gone by pleasantly, but the future has many sorrows in store. The world has passed its youth like a happy dream, and it is now entering on disillusionment, sin, sorrow, and suffering. Time is inexorable. You need not wait to see the miseries and misfortunes that will befall this race. It will be good for you to leave the city and to spend the rest of your days in a hermitage in the forest." Satyavati agreed and went to the forest with Ambika and Ambalika. These three aged queens passed through holy asceticism to the higher regions of bliss and spared themselves the sorrow of their children. Chapter 11. Bhima. The first 5 sons of Pandu, the 5 sons of Pandu and the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra grew up in mirth and merriment at Hastinapura. Bhima excelled them in physical prowess. He used to bully Duryodhana and the other Kauravas by dragging them by the hair and beating them. A great swimmer, he would dive into the pools with one or more of them clasped helpless in his arm and remain underwater till they were almost drowned. Whenever they climbed up on a tree, he would stand on the ground and kick at the tree and shake them down like ripe fruits. The bodies of the sons of Dhritarashtra would be ever sore with bruises as a result of Bhima's practical jokes. Small wonder that the sons of Dhritarashtra nursed a deep hatred for Bhima from their very infancy. As the princes grew up, Kripacharya taught them archery and the practice of arms and the other things that princes should learn. Duryodhana's jealousy towards Bhima warped his mind and made him commit many improper acts. Duryodhana was very much worried. His father being blind, the kingdom was ruled by Pandu. After his death, Yudhishthira, the heir apparent, would in course of time become king. Duryodhana thought that as his blind father was quite helpless, he must, to prevent Yudhishthira's accession to the throne, contrive a way of killing Bhima. He made arrangements to carry out his resolve, since he thought that the prowess of Pandavas would decline with the death of Bhima. Duryodhana and his brothers planned to throw Bhima into the Ganges, imprison Arjuna and Yudhishthira, and then seize the kingdom and rule it. So, Duryodhana went with his brothers and the Pandavas for a swim in the Ganges. After the sports, they slept in their tents, being exhausted. Bhima had exerted himself more than others, and as his food had been poisoned, he felt drowsy and lay down on the bank of the river. Duryodhana bound him with wild creepers and threw him into the river. The evil Duryodhana had already caused sharp spikes to be planted on the spot. This was done purposely so that Bhima might, in falling, be impaled on the spikes and lose his life. Fortunately, there was no spike in the place where Bhima fell. Poisonous water snakes bit his body. The poisonous food he had taken was counteracted by the snake poison, and Bhima came to no harm, and presently the river washed him to a bank. Duryodhana thought that Bhima must have died, as he had been thrown in the river infested with poisonous snakes and planted with spikes. So he returned to the city with the rest of the party in great joy. When Yudhishthira inquired about the whereabouts of Bhima, Duryodhana informed him that he had preceded them in the city. Yudhishthira believed Duryodhana, and as soon as he returned home, asked his mother whether Bhima had returned home. His anxious question brought forth the reply that Bhima had not yet returned, which made Yudhishthira suspect some foul play against his brother. He went again with his brother to the forest and searched everywhere, but Bhima could not be found. They went back in great sorrow. Some time later, Bhima awoke and trudged wearily back home. Kunti and Yudhishthira welcomed him and embraced him in great joy. But the poison that had entered his system, Bhima became stronger than before. Kunti sent for Vidura and told him in secret, Duryodhana is wicked and cruel. He seeks to kill Bhima since he wants to rule the kingdom. I am worried. Vidura replied, What you say is true, but keep your thoughts to yourself. For if wicked Duryodhana is accused or blamed, his anger and hatred will only increase. Your sons are blessed with long life. You need have no fear on that account. Yudhishthira also warned Bhima and said, Be silent over the matter. Hereafter, we have to be careful and help one another and protect ourselves. Duryodhana was surprised to see Bhima come back alive. His jealousy and hatred increased. He heaved a deep sigh and pined away in sorrow. Chapter 12. Karna. The Pandavas and the Kauravas learnt the practice of arms first from Kripacharya and later from Drona. A day was fixed for a test and exhibition of their proficiency in the use of arms in the presence of the royal family, and as the public had also been invited to witness the performance of their beloved princess, there was a large and enthusiastic crowd. Arjuna displayed superhuman skill with his weapons, and the vast assemblage was lost in wonder and admiration. Duryodhana's brow was dark with envy and hate. At the close of the day, there came suddenly from the entrance of the arena a sound, loud and compelling, like thunder, the sound made by the slapping of mighty arms in challenge. All eyes turned in that direction. They saw enter through the crowd, which made way in awed silence, a godlike youth from whom light and power seemed to emanate. He looked proudly around him, cast a negligent salute to Drona and Kripa, and strode up to Arjuna. The brothers, all unaware by the bitter irony of fate of their common blood, faced one another, for it was Karna. Karna addressed Arjuna in a voice deep as rumbling thunder. Arjuna, I shall show greater skill than you have displayed. With Drona's leave, Karna, the lover of battle, then and there duplicated all of Arjuna's feats with careless ease. Greater was Duryodhana's exultation. He threw his arms around Karna and said, Welcome, O thou with mighty arms, whom good fortune has sent to us. I and this kingdom of Kurus are at your command. Said Karna, I, Karna, am grateful, O king. Only two things I seek, your love and a single combat with Partha. Duryodhana clasped Karna again to his bosom and said, My prosperity is all thine to enjoy. As love flooded Duryodhana's heart, even so did blazing with wrath-filled Arjuna, who felt affronted. And glaring fiercely at Karna, who stood stately as a mountain peak, receiving the greetings of the Kaurava brothers, he said, O Karna, slain by me, thou shalt presently go to the hell appointed for those who intrude uninvited and arrive unbidden. Karna laughed in scorn. This arena is open to all, O Arjuna, and not to you alone. Might is the sanction of sovereignty, and the law is based on it. But what is the use of mere talk? Which is the weapon of the weak? Shoot arrows instead of words. And thus challenged Arjuna with Drona's permission. Arjuna, with Drona's permission, hastily embraced his brothers and stood ready for combat, while Karna, taking leave of the Kuru brothers, confronted him, weapon in hand. And as though the divine parents of the heroes sought to encourage the offspring and witness this fateful battle, Indra, the lord of the thunderclouds, and Bhaskara of the infinite rays, simultaneously appeared in the heavens. When she saw Karna, Kunti knew him as her firstborn and fainted away. Vidura instructed the maidservant to attend upon her, and she revived. She stood stupefied with anguish, not knowing what to do. As they were about to join in battle, Kripa, well versed in the rules of single combat, stepped between them and addressed Karna. This prince who is ready to fight with thee is the son of Pritha and Pandu and the scion of the Kuru race. Reveal, O mighty arm, thy parentage and the race rendered illustrious by thy birth. It is only after knowing thy lineage that Partha can fight with thee, for the high-born princes cannot engage in a single combat with unknown adventurers. When he heard these words, Karna bent down his head like a lotus under the weight of rainwater. Duryodhana stood up and said, "If the combat cannot take place merely because Karna is not a prince, why, that is easily remedied. I crown Karna as the king of Anga." He then obtained the assent of Bhishma and Dhritarashtra and performed all the necessary rites and invested Karna with the sovereignty of the kingdom of Anga, giving him the crown, the jewels, and the other royal insignia. At that moment, as the combat between the youthful heroes seemed about to commence, the old charioteer Adiratha, who was the foster father of Karna, entered the assembly, staff in hand and quaking with fear. No sooner did he see him than Karna, the newly crowned king of Anga, bowed his head and did humble obeisance in all filial reverence. The old man called him son, embraced him with his thin and trembling arms, and wept with joy, wetting with tears of love his head already moistened by the water of the coronation. At this sight, Bhima roared with laughter and said, "Oh, he's after all only the son of a charioteer. Take up the driving whip that befits thy parentage. Thou art not worthy of death at the hands of Arjuna, nor shouldst thou reign in Anga as a king." At this outrageous speech, Karna's lips trembled with anguish, and he speechlessly looked up at the setting sun with a deep sigh. But Duryodhana broke in indignantly, "It is unworthy of you, O Vrakodara, to speak thus. Valor is the hallmark of a Kshatriya, nor is there much sense in tracing great heroes and mighty rivers to their sources. I could give you 100 of instances of great men of humble birth, and I know their awkward questions might be asked of your own origin. Look at this warrior, his godlike form and bearing, his armor and his earrings, and his skill with weapons. Surely there is some mystery about him, for how could a tiger be born of an antelope? Unworthy of being a king of Anga, didst thou say? I verily hold him worthy to rule the whole world." In generous wrath, Duryodhana took Karna in his chariot and drove away. The sun set and the crowd disappeared in tumult. There were groups, loud in talk under the lights of the lamps, and some glorifying Arjuna, others Karna, and others again Duryodhana according to their predilection. Indra foresaw that a supreme contest was inevitable between his son Arjuna and Karna, and he put on a garb of a Brahmana and came to Karna, who was reputed for his charity, and begged of him his earrings and armor. The sun god had already warned Karna in a dream that Indra would try to deceive him in this manner. Still, Karna could not bring himself to refuse any gift that was asked of him. Hence, he cut off the earrings and armor with which he was born and gave them to the Brahmana. Indra, the king of gods, was filled with surprise and joy. After accepting the gift, he praised Karna as having done what no one else would do and shamed into generosity. Bade Karna ask for any boon he wanted. Karna replied, "I desire to get your weapon, the Shakti, which has the power to kill enemies." Indra granted the boon, but with a fateful provision. He said, You can use this weapon against but one enemy, and it will kill him whosoever he may be. But this killing done, the weapon will no longer be available to you, but will return to me." And with these words, Indra disappeared. Karna went to Parashurama and became his disciple by representing to him that he was a Brahmana. He learned of Parashurama the mantra for using master weapon known as the Brahmastra. One day, Parashurama was reclining with the head on Karna's lap when a stinging worm burrowed into Karna's thigh. Blood began to flow and the pain was terrible. But Karna bore it without tremor lest he should disturb the master's sleep. Parashurama awoke and saw the blood that had poured from the wound. He said, "Dear pupil, you're not a Brahmana. A Kshatriya alone can remain unmoved under all bodily torments. Tell me the truth." Karna confessed that he had told a lie in presenting himself as a Brahmana and that he was in fact the son of a charioteer. Parashurama in his anger pronounced this curse on him: "Since you have deceived your guru, the Brahmastra you have learnt shall fail you at the fated moment. You will be unable to recall the invocatory mantra when your hour comes." It was because of this curse that at the crisis of his last fight with Arjuna, Karna was not able to recall the Brahmastra spell. And though he had remembered it till then, Karna was the faithful friend of Duryodhana and remained loyal with the Kauravas until the end. After the fall of Bhishma and Drona, Karna became the leader of the Kaurava army and fought brilliantly for 2 days. In the end, the wheel of his chariot stuck in the ground, and he was not able to lift it free and drive the chariot along. While he was in this predicament, Arjuna killed him. Kunti was sunk in sorrow, all the more poignant because she had at that time to conceal his identity. Chapter 13. Drona. Drona, the son of a Brahmana named Bharadwaja, after completing his study of the Vedas and the Vedantas, devoted himself to the art of archery and became a great master. Drupada, the son of the king of Panchala, who was a friend of Bharadwaja, was a fellow student of Drona in the hermitage, and there grew up between them a generous intimacy of youth. Drupada, in his boyish enthusiasm, used to often tell Drona that he would give half his kingdom when he ascended the throne. After completing his studies, Drona married the sister of Kripa, and a son Ashwatthama was born to them. Drona was passionately attached to his wife and son, and for their sake desired to acquire wealth, a thing he had never cared for before. Learning that Parashurama was distributing his riches among the Brahmanas, he first went to him. But he was too late, as Parashurama had already given away all his wealth and was about to retire to the forest. But anxious to do something for Drona, Parashurama offered to teach him the use of weapons of which he was a supreme master. Drona joyfully agreed, and great archer as he already was, he became unrivaled master of the military art, worthy of eager welcome as preceptor in any princely house in that warlike age. Meanwhile, Drupada had ascended the throne of Panchala on the death of his father. Remembering their early intimacy and Drupada's expression of readiness to serve him, even to the extent of sharing his kingdom, Drona went to him in confident hope of being treated generously. But he found the king very different from the student. When he introduced himself as an old friend, Drupada, far from being glad to see him, felt an intolerable presumption. Drunk with power and wealth, Drupada said, "O Brahmana, how dare you address me familiarly as your friend? What friendship can there be between a throned king and a wandering beggar? What a fool must you be to presume on some long-lost past acquaintance to claim friendship with a king who rules a kingdom? How can a pauper be the friend of a wealthy man, or an ignorant boor of a learned scholar, or a coward of a hero? Friendship can exist only between equals. A vagrant beggar cannot be a friend of a sovereign." Drona was turned out of the palace with scorn in his ears and a blazing wrath in his heart. He made a mental vow to punish the arrogant king for this insult and his repudiation of the sacred claims of early friendship. His next move in search of employment was to go to Hastinapura, where he spent a few days in retirement in the house of his brother-in-law Kripacharya. One day, the princes were playing with a ball outside the precincts of the city, and in the course of the game, the ball, as well as Yudhishthira's ring, fell into a well. The princes had gathered around the well and saw the ring shining from the bottom through the clear water, but could see no way of getting it out. They did not, however, notice that a Brahmana of dark complexion stood nearby, watching them with a smile. "Princes," he surprised them by saying, "you are the descendants of the heroic Bharata race. Why can you not take out the ball as anyone skilled in arms should know how to do? Shall I do it for you?" Yudhishthira laughed and said in fun, "O Brahmana, if you take out the ball, we will see to that you have a good meal in the house of Kripacharya." Then Drona, the Brahmana stranger, took a blade of grass and sent it forth into the well after reciting certain words of power for propelling it as an arrow. The blade of grass straightway sped and stuck into the ball. Afterwards, he sent a number of similar blades in succession, which clinging together formed a chain, wherewith Drona took out the ball. The princes were lost in amazement and delight and begged of him to get the ring also. Drona borrowed a bow, and fixed an arrow on the string and sent it right into the ring. The arrow, rebounding, brought up the ring, and the Brahmana handed it to the prince with a smile. Seeing these feats, the princes were astonished and said, "We salute you, O Brahmana. Who are you? Is there anything we can do for you?" And they bowed to him. He said, "O princes, go to Bhishma and learn from him who I am." From the description given by the princes, Bhishma knew that the Brahmana was none other than the famous master Drona. He decided that Drona was the fittest person to impart further instructions to the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So Bhishma received him with special honor and employed him to instruct the princes in the use of arms. As soon as the Kauravas and the Pandavas had acquired mastery in the science of arms, Drona sent Karna and Duryodhana to seize Drupada and bring him alive in discharge of the duty they owed to him as their master. They went as ordered by him but could not accomplish their task. The master sent forth Arjuna on the same errand. He defeated Drupada in battle and brought him and his ministers captive to Drona. Then Drona smilingly addressed Drupada, "Great king, do not fear for your life. In your boyhood we were companions, but you were pleased to forget it and dishonor me. You told me that a king alone could be a friend to a king. Now I am a king, having conquered your kingdom. Still, I seek to regain my friendship with you, so I give you half of your kingdom that has become mine by conquest. Your creed is that friendship is only possible between equals, and we shall now be equals, each owning half of your kingdom." Drona thought this sufficient revenge for the insult he had suffered, and set Drupada at liberty and treated him with honor. Drupada's pride was thus humbled, but since hate is never extinguished by retaliation, few things are harder to bear than the pangs of wounded vanity. The hatred of Drona and a wish to be revenged on him became the ruling passion of Drupada's life. The king performed tapas and underwent fasts and conducted sacrifice in order to win the gratified gods to bless him with a son who would slay Drona and a daughter who should wed Arjuna. His efforts were crowned with the success with the birth of Drishtadyumna, who commanded the Pandava army at Kurukshetra and, helped by a strange combination of circumstances, slew the otherwise unconquerable Drona, and the birth of Draupadi, the consort of the Pandavas. End of chapter 13. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, a recording for Vox Olympia. The Mahabharata, translated by C Rajagopalachari, Chapter 14, The Wax Palace. The jealousy of Duryodhana began to grow at the sight of the physical strength of Bhima and the dexterity of Arjuna. Karna and Shakuni became Duryodhana's evil counselors in planning wily stratagems. As for poor Dhritarashtra, he was a wise man, no doubt, and he also loved his brother's sons, but he was weak of will and dotingly attached to his own children. For his children's sake, the worse became the better reason, and he would sometimes even knowingly follow the wrong path. Duryodhana sought in various ways to kill the Pandavas. It was by means of secret help rendered by Vidura, who wanted to save the family from a great sin, that the Pandavas escaped with their lives. One unforgivable offense of the Pandavas in the eyes of Duryodhana was that the people of the city used to praise them openly and declare in season out and out of season that Yudhishthira alone was fit to be the king. They would flock together and argue Dhritarashtra could never be king, for he was born blind. It is not proper that he should now hold the kingdom in his hands. Bhishma cannot be king either, because he is devoted to truth and to his vow that he could not be a king. Hence Yudhishthira alone should be crowned as king. He alone can rule the Kuru race and the kingdom with justice. Thus people talked everywhere. Their words were poison to Duryodhana's ears and made him writhe with and burn with jealousy. He went to Dhritarashtra and complained bitterly of the public talk. Father, the citizens babble irrelevant nonsense. They have no respect even for such venerable persons as Bhishma and yourself. They say that Yudhishthira should be immediately crowned king. This would bring disaster on us. You were set aside because of your blindness and your brother became the king. If Yudhishthira is to succeed his father, where do we come? What chance has our progeny? After Yudhishthira, his son and his son's son, and then his sons will be kings. We will sink into poor relations dependent on them even for our food. To live in hell would be better than that. These words, Dhritarashtra began to ponder and said, Son, what you say is true. Still, Yudhishthira will not stay from the path of virtue. He loves all. He's truly inherited all the excellent virtues of his deceased father. People praise him and will support him. All the ministers of the state and commanders of army to whom Pandu had endeared himself by his nobility of character will surely espouse his cause. As for the people, they idolize the Pandavas. We cannot oppose them with any chance of success. If we do injustice, the citizens will rise in insurrection and either kill us or expel us. We shall only cover ourselves with ignominy. Duryodhana replied, Your fears are baseless. Bhishma will be at worst be neutral, while Ashwatthama is devoted to me, which means that his father Drona and uncle Kripa will also be on our side. Vidura cannot openly oppose us, if for no other reason, because he has not the strength. Send the Pandavas immediately to Varunavata. I tell you the solemn truth that my cup of suffering is full and I can bear no more. It pierces my heart and renders me sleepless and makes my life a torment. After sending the Pandavas to Varunavata, we shall try to strengthen our party. Later, some politicians were prevailed upon to join Duryodhana's party and advise the king on the matter. Kanika, the minister of Shakuni, was their leader. O king, he said, guard yourselves against the sons of Pandu, for their goodness and influence are a menace to you and yours. The Pandavas are the sons of your brother, but the nearer the kin, the closer and deadlier the danger. They are very strong. Shakuni's minister continued, Be not wroth with me if I say a king should be mighty in action as in name, for nobody will believe in strength which is never displayed. State affairs should be kept secret, and the earliest indication to the public of a wise plan should be its execution. Also, evils must be eradicated promptly, from a thorn which has been allowed to remain in the body may cause a festering wound. Powerful enemies should be destroyed. Even a weak foe should not be neglected, since a mere spark, if overlooked, may cause a forest fire. A strong enemy should be destroyed by means of stratagem, and it would be folly to show mercy on him. O king, guard yourself against the sons of Pandu. They are very powerful. Duryodhana told Dhritarashtra of his success in securing adherents I have brought the goodwill of the king's attendants with the gifts of wealth and honor. I have won over his ministers to our cause. If you will adroitly prevail upon the Pandavas to go to Varanavata, the city, and the whole kingdom will take our side. They will not have a friend left here. And once the kingdom has become ours, there will be no power to harm left in them, and it may even be possible to let them come back. When many began to say what he himself wished to believe, Dhritarashtra's mind was shaken and he yielded to his son's counsels. It only remained to give effect to the plot. The ministers began to praise the beauty of Varanavata in the hearing of the Pandavas and made mention of the fact that a great festival in honor of Shiva would be conducted there with all pomp and splendor. The unsuspecting Pandavas were easily persuaded, especially when Dhritarashtra also told them in tones of great affection that they should certainly go and witness the festivities, not only because they were worth seeing, but because the people of the place were eager to welcome them. The Pandavas took leave of Bhishma and other elders and went to Varanavata. Duryodhana was elated. He plotted with Karna and Shakuni to kill Kunti and her sons at Varanavata. They sent for Purochana, a minister, and gave him secret instructions which he bound himself to carry out faithfully. Before the Pandavas proceeded to Varanavata, Purochana, true to his instructions, hastened to the spot well in advance and had a beautiful palace built for their reception. Combustible materials like jute, lac, ghee, oil, and fat were used in the construction of the palace. The materials for plastering of the walls were also inflammable. He skillfully filled up various parts of the building with dry things that could catch fire easily, and had inviting seats and bedsteads disposed at the most combustible places. Every convenience was furnished for the Pandavas to dwell in the city without fear until the palace was built. When the Pandavas had settled down in the wax house, the idea was to set it to fire at night when they were sound asleep. The ostentatious love and solicitude with which the Pandavas had been received and treated would obviate all suspicion, and the fire would be taken as a sad case of pure accident. No one would dream of blaming the Kauravas. Chapter 15. The escape of the Pandavas. After taking reverential leave of the elders and embracing their comrades, the Pandavas proceeded to Varanavata. The citizens accompanied them a part of their way and returned unwillingly to the city. Vidura pointedly warned Yudhishthira in words intelligible only to the prince. He alone will escape the danger, forestalls the intentions of an astute enemy. There are weapons sharper than those made of steel, and the wise man who would escape destruction must know the means to guard against them. The conflagration that devastates a forest cannot hurt a rat which shelters itself in a hole, or a porcupine which burrows in the earth. The wise man knows his bearings by looking at the stars. They had started on their journey in sunshine of joy. They now proceeded in the dark cloud of sorrow and anxiety. The people of Varnavata were very happy to learn of the coming of the Pandavas to their city and welcome them. After a brief stay in other houses, while the palace specially meant for them was being got ready, they moved into it under Purochana's guidance. It was named Shivam, which means prosperity, and that was the name which, in ghastly irony, was given to the death trap. Yudhishthira diligently examined the whole place, bearing in mind Vidura's warning, and verified that the building was without a shadow of a doubt constructed with combustible material. Yudhishthira told Bhima, though we know very well that the palace is a trap of death, we should not make Purochana suspect that we know his plot. We should get away at the right moment, but escape would be difficult if we gave room for any suspicion. So, they stayed in that house to all appearance free from care. Meanwhile, Vidura had sent an expert miner who met them in secret. My password is the veiled warning Vidura gave you. I've been sent to help you for your protection. This was meant to indicate to Yudhishthira, and to him alone, Duryodhana's hideous plot and the means of escape from danger. Yudhishthira answered that he had grasped Vidura's meaning, and later he communicated it to Kunti Devi. Henceforward, the miner worked for many days in secret, unknown to Purochana, and completed a subterranean egress from the wax house right under and across the walls and the moat which ran around the precincts. Purochana had his quarters at the gateway of the palace. The Pandavas kept armed vigil during the night, but by day they used to go out hunting in the forest, to all appearances bent on pleasure, but really to make themselves familiar with the forest paths. As has already been said, they carefully kept to themselves their knowledge of the wicked plot against their lives. On his side, Purochana, anxious to lull all suspicion and make the murderous fire seem an accident, waited fully a year before putting the plot into effect. At last, Purochana felt he had waited long enough, and the watchful Yudhishthira, knowing that the fated moment had arrived, called his brothers together and told them that now or never was the time to escape. Kunti Devi arranged a sumptuous feast for the attendants that day. Her idea was to lull them to well-fed sleep at night. At midnight, Bhima set fire to the palace in several places. Kunti Devi and the Pandava brothers hurried out through the subterranean passage, groping their way out in the darkness. Presently, there was a roaring fire all over the palace, and a fast-swelling crowd of frightened citizens all around in loud and helpless lamentation. Some bustled aimlessly in futile efforts to put out the conflagration, and all joined in the cry, "Alas, alas! This surely is Duryodhana's work, and he is killing the sinless Pandavas." The palace was reduced to ashes. Purochana's residence was enveloped in flames before he could escape, and he fell an unpitied victim to his own wicked plot. The people of Varnavata sent the following message to Hastinapur. The palace, which was the abode of the Pandavas, is burnt down, and no one in it escaped alive. Vyasa has beautifully described the then mental state of Dhritarashtra. Just as the water of a deep pool is cool at the bottom and warm on the surface, so the heart of Dhritarashtra was at once warm with joy and chilled with sorrow. Dhritarashtra and his sons cast off their royal garments in token of mourning for the Pandavas whom they believed consumed in the fire. They dressed themselves in single garments as became sorrowful kinsmen and went to the river and performed propitiatory funeral rites. No outward show of heartbroken bereavement was omitted. It was noticed by some that Vidura was not so overcome by sorrow as others, and this was set down to his philosophical bent of mind. But the real reason was that he knew the Pandavas had escaped to safety. When he looked sad, he was in fact following his mind's eye the weary wanderings of the Pandavas. Seeing that Bhishma was sunk in sorrow, Vidura secretly comforted him by revealing to him the story of their successful escape. Bhima saw that his mother and brothers were exhausted by their nightly vigils as well as by fear and anxiety. He therefore carried his mother on his shoulders and took Nakula and Sahadeva on his hips, and supporting Yudhishthira and Arjuna with his two hands. Thus heavily laden, he strode effortlessly like a lordly elephant, forcing his way through the forest and pushing aside the shrubs and the trees that obstructed his path. When they reached the Ganges, there was a boat ready for them in charge of a boatman who knew their secret. They crossed the river in darkness, and entering a mighty forest, they went on at night in the darkness that wrapped them like a shroud, and in a silence broken hideously by the frightful noises of wild animals. At last, quite foredone by toil, they sat down, unable to bear the pangs of thirst and overcome by drowsiness of sheer fatigue. Kunti Devi said, "I do not care even if the sons of Dhritarashtra are here to seize me, but I must stretch my legs." She forthwith laid herself down and was sunk in sleep. Bhima forced his way about the tangled forest in search of water in the darkness. Finding a pool, he wetted his upper garments and made a cup of lotus leaves and brought water to his mother and brothers who were perishing with thirst. Then, while the others slept in merciful forgetfulness of their vows, Bhima alone sat awake, absorbed in deep thought. Do not the plants and the creepers of the forest mutually help each other and live in peace? He reflected. Why should the wicked Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana try to injure us in these ways? Sinless himself, Bhima could not understand the spring of sinfulness in others and was lost in grief. The Pandavas marched on, suffering many hardships and overcoming many dangers. Part of their way, they would carry their mother to make better speed. Sometimes tired beyond even heroic endurance, they would pause and rest. Sometimes full of life and the glorious strength of youth, they would race with each other. They met Bhagavan Vyasa on the way. All of them bowed before him and received encouragement and wise counsel from him. When Kunti told him of the sorrows that had befallen them, Vyasa consoled her with these words: "No virtuous man is strong enough to live in virtue at all times, nor is any sinner bad enough to exist in one welter of sin. Life is a tangled web, and there is no one in the world who has not done both good and evil. Each and every one has to bear the consequences of his action. Do not give way to sorrow. Then they put on a garb of Brahmanas as advised by Vyasa and went to the city of Ekachakra and stayed there in the Brahmana's house waiting for better days. Chapter 16. The Slaying of Bakasura. In the city of Ekachakra, the Pandavas stayed in the guise of Brahmanas, begging their food in Brahmana streets and bringing what they got to their mother, who would wait anxiously till their return. If they did not come back in time, she would be worried, fearing that some evil might have befallen them. Kunti would divide the food they brought in 2 equal portions. One half would go to Bhima, the other half would be shared by the other brothers and the mother. Bhima, being born of the wind god, had great strength and a mighty appetite. Vrakodara is one of the names of Bhima. It means wolf-bellied and of a wolf, as it looks always famished. And however much it might eat, its hunger is never quite satisfied. Bhima's insatiable hunger and the scanty food he used to get at Ekachakra went ill together, and he daily grew thin, which caused much distress to his mother and brothers. Sometime later, Bhima became acquainted with the potter, for whom he helped and fetched clay. The potter in return presented him with a big earthen pot and became an object of merriment to the street urchins. One day, when the other brothers had gone to beg for alms, Bhimasena had stayed behind with his mother, and they heard loud lamentations from the house of their Brahmana landlord. Some great calamity surely had befallen the poor family, and Kunti went inside to learn what it was. The Brahmana and his wife could hardly speak for weeping, but at last Brahmana said to his wife, "O unfortunate and foolish woman, though time again I wish we should leave the city for good, you would not agree. You persisted in saying that you were born and bred here, and here you would stay where your parents and relations had lived and died. How can I think of losing you, who have been to me at once my life's mate, loving mother, the wife who bore my children, and nay, my all in all? I cannot send you to death while I keep myself alive. This little girl has been given to us by God as a trust to be handed over in time to a worthy man. It is unrighteous to sacrifice her, who is a gift of God, to perpetuate the race. It is equally impossible to allow this other, our son, to be killed. How can we live after consigning to death our only solace in life and our hope for hereafter? If he is lost, who would pour libations for us and our ancestors? Alas, you did not pay heed to my words, and this is the deadly fruit of your perversity. If I give up my life, this girl and boy will surely die soon for the want of a protector. What shall I do? It is best that all of us perish together. The Brahmana burst forth sobbing. The wife replied, I've been a good wife to you and done my duty by bearing you a daughter and a son. You are able, and I am not, to bring up and protect your children, just as a cast offal is pounced upon and seized by rapacious birds. A poor widowed woman is an easy prey to wicked and dishonest people. Dogs fight for a clot wet with ghee, and in pulling it hither and thither in unclean greed, tear it into foul rags. It would be best if I'm handed over to the Rakshasa. Blessed indeed is the woman who passes to the other world while her husband is alive. This, as you know, is what the scriptures say, but bid me farewell. Take care of my children. I have been happy with you. I have performed many meritorious actions, but my faithful devotion to you, I am sure, of heaven. Death has no terror for one who has been good to his wife. After I am gone, take another wife. Gladden me with a brave smile. Give me your blessings and send me to the Rakshasa. Hearing the words of his wife, the Brahmana tenderly embraced her, and utterly overcome by her love and courage, he wept like a child. When he could find his voice, he replied, O beloved and noble one, what words are these? Can I bear to live without you? The first duty of the married man is to protect his wife, and I should indeed be a pitiful sinner if I lived after giving you up to the Rakshasa, sacrificing both love and duty. The daughter, who was hearing this piteous conversation, now interposed with sobs. Listen to me, child though I be, then do what is proper. It is me alone that you can spare to the Rakshasa. By sacrificing one soul, that is myself, you can save the others. Let me be the little boat to take you across the river of calamity. In like manner, a woman without a guardian becomes the sport of wicked people who drag her hither and thither. It is impossible for me to protect two fatherless orphans, and they will perish miserably like a fish in a waterless pond. If both of you pass away, both I and this little baby brother of mine will soon perish unprotected in this hard world. If this family of ours can be saved from destruction by my single death, what a good death mine would be. Even if you consider my welfare alone, you should send me to the Rakshasa. At these brave words of the poor child, the parents tenderly embraced her and wept. Seeing them all in tears, the boy, hardly more than a baby, started up with glowing eyes and lisping, Father, do not weep. Mother, do not weep. Sister, do not weep. And he went to each and sat on their laps by turns. Then he rose up, took a stick of firewood, and brandishing it about, said in a sweet childish treble, I shall kill the Rakshasa with this stick. The child's action and speech made them smile in the midst of their tears, but only added to their great sorrow. Feeling this was the moment for intervention, Kunti Devi entered and inquired for the cause of their sorrow and whether there was anything she could do to help them. Brahmana said, Mother, this is a sorrow far beyond your aid. There is a cave near the city where lives a cruel and terribly strong Rakshasa named Bakasura. He has forcibly seized this city and kingdom 13 years ago. Since then, he has held us in cruel thraldom. The Kshatriya ruler of this country has fled to the city of Vetrakiya and is unable to protect us. The Rakshasa, formerly used to issue from his cave, whenever he liked and mad with hunger, indiscriminately kill and eat men, women, and children in the city. The citizens prayed to the Rakshasa to come in sort of a stipulation in place of this promiscuous slaughter. They prayed, "Do not kill us wantonly at your whim and pleasure. Once a week we shall bring you sufficient meat, rice, curds, intoxicating liquors, and many other delicacies. We will deliver this to you in a carriage drawn by 2 bullocks, driven by a human being, taken from each house in turn. You can make a repast of the rice along with the bullocks and the man, but refrain from this mad orgy of slaughter." The Rakshasa agreed to the proposal. From that day, this strong Rakshasa has been protecting this kingdom from foreign raids and wild beasts. This arrangement has been in force for many years. No hero has been found to free this country from this pest, for the Rakshasa has invariably defeated and killed all brave men who tried. Mother, our legitimate sovereign is unable to protect us. The citizens of a country whose king is weak should not marry and beget children. A worthy family life with culture and domestic happiness is possible only under the rule of a good and strong king. Wife, wealth, and other things are not safe if there be no proper king ruling over us. And having long suffered with the sight of others' sorrow, our turn has now come to send a person as prey to Rakshasa, and I have not the means to purchase a substitute. None of us can bear to live after sending one of us to a cruel death, so I shall go with my whole family to him. Let the wicked glutton gorge himself with all of us. I have pained you with these things, but you wish to know. Only God can help us, but we have lost all hope of even that." The political truths contained in this story of Ekachakra are noteworthy and suggestive. Kunti talked the matter over with Bhimasena and returned to the Brahmana. She said, "Good man, do not despair. God is great. I have 5 sons. One of them will take the food to the Rakshasa." The Brahmana jumped up in amazed surprise, then shook his head sadly and would not hear of a substituted sacrifice. Kunti said, "O Brahmana, do not be afraid. My son is endowed with superhuman powers derived from mantras and will certainly kill the Rakshasa, as I have myself seen him kill many other such Rakshasas. But keep this a secret, for if you reveal it, his power will come to naught." Kunti's fear was that if the story got noise abroad, the Vyota and his men would see the hand of Pandavas and find out their whereabouts. Bhima was filled with unbounded joy and enthusiasm at the arrangement made by Kunti. The other brothers returned to the house with alms. Dharmaputra saw the face of Bhimasena radiant with joy to which it had been a stranger, and inferred that he was resolved on some hazardous adventure, and questioned Kunti, who told him everything. Yudhishthira said, "What is this? Is not this rash and thoughtless? Relying on Bhima's strength, we sleep without care or fear. It is not through Bhima's strength and daring that we hope to regain the kingdom that has been seized by. Is it not through Bhima's strength and daring that we hope to regain the kingdom that has been seized by our deceitful enemies? Was it not through the prowess of Bhima that we escaped from the wax palace? And you are risking the life of Bhima, who is our present protection and future hope. I fear your many trials have clouded your judgment." Kunti Devi replied, "Dear sons, we lived happily for many years in the house of this Brahmana. Duty, nay, it's man's highest of virtue, is to repay the benefit is enjoyed by doing good in his turn. I know the heroism of Bhima and have no fears. Remember who carried us from Varnavata and who killed the demon Hidamba? It is our duty to be of service to this Brahmana family. After a fierce battle, the Rakshasa Bakasura was slain by Bhima, who pretended to bring him a cartload of food. End of chapter 16. The Mahabharata translated by C Rajagopalachari, a recording for Vox Olympia. The Mahabharata by C Rajagopalachari, Chapter 17, Draupadi's Swayamvaram. While the Pandavas were living in disguise as Brahmanas at Ekachakra, the news of Swayamvara of Draupadi, the daughter of Drupada, king of Panchala, reached them. Many Brahmanas of Ekachakrapura planned to go to Panchala in hope of receiving customary gifts and to see the festivities and the pageant of a royal wedding. Kunti, with her motherly instinct, read her son's desire to go to Panchala and win Draupadi. So she told Yudhishthira, "We have been in the city so long that it is time to think of going somewhere else. We've seen these hills and dales till we're tired of them. The alms doled out to us are diminishing, and it is not good to outstay your entertainment. Let us therefore go to Drupada's kingdom, which is reputed to be fair and prosperous." Kunti was second to none in worldly wisdom and sagacity, and could gracefully divine her son's thoughts and spare them the awkwardness of expressing them. The Brahmanas went in groups to witness the Swayamvara, and the Pandavas mingled with them in the guise of Brahmanas. After a long march, the party reached the beautiful city of Drupada and billeted themselves in the house of a potter as obscure Brahmanas of no note. Though Drupada and Drona were outwardly at peace, the former never could forget or forgive the humiliation he had suffered at the latter's hands. Drupada's one wish was to give his daughter in marriage to Arjuna. Drona loved Arjuna so dearly that he could hardly look upon his pupil's father-in-law as his deadly foe. And if they were in a war, Drupada would be all the stronger for being Arjuna's father-in-law. When he heard the news of the destruction of the Pandavas at the Varnavata, he was plunged in sorrow, but was relieved by a later rumor that they had escaped. The marriage hall was beautifully decorated and built amidst a finely laid out group of new guest houses designed to accommodate the Swayamvara suitors and guests. Attractive sights and sports had been arranged for public entertainment, and there were glorious festivities for 14 days continuously. A mighty steel bow was placed in the marriage hall. The candidate for the prince's hand was required to string the bow and with it shoot a steel arrow through the central aperture of a revolving disc at a target placed on high. This required almost superhuman strength and skill, and Drupada proclaimed that he, who the hero would win his daughter, should perform this feat. Many valiant princes had gathered there from all parts of Bharatavarsha. The sons of Dhritarashtra were there as well: Karna, Krishna, Shishupala, Jarasandha and Shalya. Besides the competitors, there was a huge concourse of spectators and visitors. The noise that issued therefrom resembled the uproar of the ocean, and over it all arose the auspicious sound of festal music from hundreds of instruments. Drishtadyumna, on horseback, rode in front of his sister Draupadi, seated on an elephant. Fresh from her auspicious bridal bath and clad in flowing silk, Draupadi dismounted and entered the Swayamvara hall, seeming to fill it with the sweetness of her presence and perfect beauty. Garland in hand, and coyly glancing at valiant princes, who for their part looked at her in speechless admiration, she ascended the dais. The Brahmanas repeated the usual mantras and offered oblations in the fire. After the peace invocation had been chanted and the flourish of music had stopped, Drishtadyumna took Draupadi by hand and led her to the center of the hall. There he proclaimed in loud, clear tones, "Hear ye, O princes, seated in state in this assembly. Here is the bow, and there is the target, and here are the arrows. He who sends 5 arrows in succession through the hole of the wheel unerringly hits the target, and if he also be of a good family and presence, shall win my sister." And then he narrated to Draupadi the name and ancestry and description of the several suitors assembled there. Many noted princes rose one after another and tried in vain to string the bow. It was too heavy and stiff for them, and they returned to their places abashed and ashamed. Shishupala, Jarasandha, Shalya, Duryodhana were among the unsuccessful aspirants. When Karna came forward, all the assemblage expected that he would be successful, but he failed by just a hair's breadth, and the string slid back flashingly, and the mighty bow jumped out of his hand like a thing of life. There was great clamor and angry talk, some even saying that it was an impossible test put up to shame the kings. And all the noises were hushed, but there arose among the group of Brahmanas a youth who advanced towards the bow. It was Arjuna, who had come disguised as a Brahmana, and he stood up. Wild clamor burst forth again from the crowd. Brahmanas themselves were divided in opinion, some being highly delighted that there should be among them a lad of mettle enough to compete, while others, more envious or worldly wise, said what imprudence it was for this brahmacharan to enter the list when heroes like Karna and Shalya and others had met with failure. But there were others again who spoke differently as they noted the noble and shapely proportions of the youth. They said, "We feel from his presence that he is going to win. He looks sure of himself, and he certainly knows what he is about. The Brahmana may be physically weaker, but is it all a matter of brute strength? What about the power of austerities? Why should he not try?" And they blessed him. Arjuna approached the place where the bow laid and asked Drishtadyumna, Can a Brahmana try to bend the bow? Drishtadyumna answered, O best of Brahmanas, my sister will become the life mate of anyone of good family and presence who bends the bow and shoots the target. My words stand, and there will be no going back on them. The Arjuna meditated on Narayana, the Supreme God, and took the bow in his hand and strung it with ease. He placed an arrow on the string and looked around with a smile while the crowd was lost in spellbound silence. And without pause or hesitation, he shot 5 arrows in succession through the revolving mechanism right into the target so that it fell down. The crowd was in tumult, and there was a blare of musical instruments. The Brahmanas who were seated in the assembly in large numbers sent forth shouts of joy, waving aloft their deerskins in exultation, as though the whole community had won Draupadi. The uproar that followed was indescribable. Draupadi shone with a fresh beauty. Her face glowed with happiness, which streamed out of her eyes as she looked on Arjuna. She approached him and placed the garland on his neck. Yudhishthira, Nakula, and Sahadeva returned in haste to the potter's house to convey the glad news immediately to their mother. Bhima alone remained in the assembly, fearing that some danger might befall Arjuna from the Kshatriyas. As anticipated by Bhima, the princes were loud in wrath. They said, "The practice of Swayamvara, the choosing of a bridegroom, is not prevalent among the Brahmanas. If this maiden does not care to marry a prince, she should remain a virgin and burn herself on the pyre. How can a Brahmana marry her? We should oppose this marriage and prevent it so as to protect righteousness and save the practice of Swayamvara from the peril which threatens it." And a free fight seemed imminent. Bhima plucked a tree by the roots and, stripping it off the foliage, stood armed with his formidable bludgeon by the side of Arjuna, ready for any event. Draupadi said nothing but stood holding on to the skirts of the deerskins in which Arjuna was clad. Krishna, Balaram, and others sought to appease those who had created the confusion. Arjuna proceeded to the house of the potter accompanied by Draupadi. As Bhima and Arjuna were taking Draupadi to their temporary abode, Drishtadyumna followed them at a distance, unseen by them, closely observed everything that took place. He was amazed and delighted at what he saw, and returning secretly, he told the king Drupada, "Father, I think the Brahmanas are the Pandavas." Draupadi accompanied them, holding to the skirts of the deerskins of that youth, and she was not at all abashed. I also followed, and I saw all 5, and a venerable and august lady, who I have no doubt is Kunti herself. Invited by Drupada, Kunti and the Pandavas went to the palace. Dharmaputra confided to the king they were the Pandavas. He also informed them of their decision to marry Draupadi in common. Draupadi rejoiced at knowing that they were the Pandavas, which set at rest all anxiety regarding the enmity of Drona. But he was surprised and disgusted when he heard that they would jointly marry Draupadi. Drupada opposed this and said, "How unrighteous! How did this idea get into your head? This immoral idea that goes against the traditional usage." Yudhishthira answered, "O king, kindly excuse us. In a time of great peril, we vowed that we would share all things in common. We cannot break that pledge. Our mother has commanded us so." Finally, Draupadi yielded, and the marriage was celebrated. Chapter 18. Indraprastha. When the news of the incident that took place during the Swayamvara at Panchala reached Hastinapura, Vidura was happy. He immediately went to Dhritarashtra and said, "O king, our family has become stronger because the daughter of Drupada has become our daughter-in-law. Our stars are good." Dhritarashtra thought in his blind fondness for his son that it was Duryodhana who had also gone to take part in the Swayamvara and that had won Draupadi. Under this mistaken impression, he replied, "It is indeed as you say, a good time for us. Go at once and bring Draupadi. Let us give Panchali a joyous welcome." Vidura hastened to correct the mistake. He said, "The blessed Pandavas are alive, and it is Arjuna who has won the daughter of Drupada. The 5 Pandavas have married her jointly according to the rites enjoined by the Shastras. With their mother Kunti Devi, they are happy and well under the care of Drupada." At these words of Vidura, Dhritarashtra felt frustrated but concealed his disappointment. He said to Vidura with apparent joy, "O Vidura, I am delighted at your words. Are the dear Pandavas really alive? We have been mourning them as dead. The news you have brought us now is balm to my heart. So the daughter of Drupada has become a daughter-in-law. Well, very good." Duryodhana's jealousy and hatred redoubled when he found that the Pandavas had somehow escaped from the wax palace and after spending a year in incognito had now become even more powerful on account of their alliance with the mighty king of Panchala. Duryodhana and his brother Dushasana went to their uncle Shakuni and said in sorrow, "Uncle, we're really undone. We have been let down by relying on Purochana. Our enemies, the Pandavas, are cleverer than ourselves, and fortune also seems to favor them. Drushtadumna and Shikandin have become their allies. What can we do?" Karna and Duryodhana went to the blind Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana said, "You told Vidura that better days were ahead of us. Is it a good time for us that our natural enemies, the Pandavas, have so waxed in strength that they will certainly destroy us? We could not carry out our plot against them. The fact that they know about it is added danger. It has now come to this, and either we must destroy them here and now, or we shall ourselves perish. Favor us with your counsel in this matter." Dhritarashtra replied, "Dear son, what you say is true. You should not, however, let Vidura know our mind. That was why I spoke to him in that manner. Let me now hear your suggestion as to what we should do." Duryodhana said, "I feel so distracted that no plan occurs to me. Perhaps we may take advantage of the fact that these Pandavas are not born of one and the same mother and create enmity between them, the sons of Madri and those of Kunti. We can also try to bribe Drupada into joining our side. That he has given away his daughter in marriage to the Pandavas will not stand in the way of our making him an ally. There is nothing that cannot be accomplished by the power of wealth." Karna smiled and said, "This is but futile talk." Duryodhana continued, "We should somehow make sure the Pandavas do not come here. and demand of us the kingdom that is now in our possession. We may commission a few Brahmanas to spread convenient rumors in Drupada's city and severally tell the Pandavas that they would meet with great danger if they go to Hastinapura. Then the Pandavas would fear to come here and we should all be safe from them. Karna replied, "This too is idle talk. You cannot frighten them that way." Duryodhana continued, "Can we not create discord among the Pandavas by means of Draupadi? Her polyandrous marriage is very convenient for us. We shall arouse doubts and jealousies in their minds through the efforts of experts in the science of erotics. We shall certainly succeed. We can get a beautiful woman to beguile some of the sons of Kunti and thus make Draupadi turn against them. If Draupadi begins to suspect any of them, we can invite him to Hastinapura and use him so that our plans prospers." Karna laughed, this also to scorn. He said, "None of your proposals is any good. You cannot conquer the Pandavas by stratagem. When they were here and were them, and you think we can deceive them now? When they have acquired experience and are moreover under the protection of Drupada, they have seen through your designs. Stratagems will not do hereafter. You cannot sow dissension among them. You cannot bribe the wise and honorable Drupada. You will not give up the Pandavas on any account. Draupadi also can never be turned against them. Therefore, there is only one way left for us, and that is to attack them before they grow stronger and our friends join them. We should make a surprise attack on the Pandavas and Drupada before Krishna joins them with his Yadava army. We should take the heroic way out of our difficulty as befits Kshatriyas. Trickery will prove useless." Thus spoke Karna. Dhritarashtra could not make up his mind. The king therefore sent for Bhishma and Drona and consulted them. Bhishma was very happy when he heard that the Pandavas were alive and well as guests of King Drupada of Panchala, whose daughter they had married. Consulted on the steps to be taken, Bhishma, wise with ripe knowledge of right and wrong, replied, "The proper course will be to welcome them back and give them half the kingdom. The citizens of the state also desire such a settlement. This is the only way to maintain the dignity of our family. There is much loose talk not creditable to you about the fire incident at the wax house. All blame, even all suspicion, will be set at rest if you invite the Pandavas and hand over half the kingdom to them. This is my advice." Drona also gave the same counsel and suggested sending a proper messenger to bring about an amicable settlement and establish peace. Karna flew into a rage at this suggestion. He was very much devoted to Duryodhana and could not at all hear the idea of giving a portion of the kingdom to the Pandavas. He told Dhritarashtra, "I am surprised that Drona, who has received wealth and honor at your hands, has made such a suggestion. A king should examine critically the advice of his ministers before accepting or rejecting it." At these words of Karna, Drona, his old eyes full of anger, said, "O wicked man, you're advising the king to go on the wrong path. If Dhritarashtra does not do what Bhishma and myself have advised, the Kauravas will certainly meet with destruction in the near future." Then Dhritarashtra sought the advice of Vidura, who replied, "The counsel given by Bhishma, the head of our race, and Drona, the master, is wise and just and should not be disregarded. The Pandavas are also your children, like Duryodhana and his brothers. You should realize that those who advise you to injure the Pandavas are really bent upon the destruction of the race. Drupada and his son, as well as Krishna and the Yadavas, are staunch allies of the Pandavas. It is impossible to defeat them in battle. Karna's advice is foolish and wrong. It is reported abroad that we try to kill Pandavas in the wax house, should first of all try to clear ourselves of the blame. The citizens in the whole country are delighted to know that the Pandavas are alive, and they desire to see them once again. Do not listen to the words of Duryodhana. Karna and Shakuni are but raw youths, ignorant of statesmanship and incompetent to advise. Follow Bhishma's advice." In the end, Dhritarashtra determined to establish peace by giving half the kingdom to the sons of Pandu. He sent Vidura to the kingdom of Panchala to fetch the Pandavas and Draupadi. Vidura went to the city of King Drupada in a speedy vehicle, taking along with him many kinds of jewels and other valuable presents. Vidura rendered due honor to King Drupada and requested him on the behalf of Dhritarashtra to send the Pandavas with Panchali to Hastinapura. Drupada mistrusted Dhritarashtra, but he merely said, "Pandavas may do as they like." Vidura went to Kunti Devi and prostrated himself before her. She said, "O son of Vichita Virya, you saved my sons. They are therefore your children. I trust you. I shall do as you advise." But she was also suspicious of Dhritarashtra's intentions. Vidura thus assured her, "Your children will never meet with destruction. They will inherit kingdom and acquire great renown. Come, let us go." At last, Drupada also gave his assent, and Vidura returned to Hastinapura with the Pandavas, Kunti, and Draupadi. In jubilant welcome of the beloved princes who were returning home after long years of exile and travail, the streets of Hastinapura had been sprinkled with water and decorated with flowers, as it had already been decided, half the kingdom was made over to Pandavas, and Yudhishthira was duly crowned king. Dhritarashtra blessed the newly crowned Yudhishthira and bade him farewell with these words, "My brother Pandu made this kingdom prosperous. May you prove a worthy heir to his renown. King Pandu delighted in abiding by my advice. Love me in the same manner. My sons are wicked and proud. I have made this settlement so that there may be no strife or hatred between you. Go to Kandavaprastha and make it your capital. Our ancestors, Pururavas, Nahusha, and Yayati, ruled the kingdom from there. That was our ancient capital. Re-establish that and be famous." In this manner, Dhritarashtra spoke affectionately to Yudhishthira. The Pandavas renovated the ruined city, built palaces and forts, and renamed it Indraprastha. It grew in wealth and beauty and became the admiration of the world. The Pandavas ruled there happily for 36 years with their mother and Draupadi, never straying from the path of Dharma.